It's not been the ideal start to the new season for the reigning Constructors' Champions Mercedes, and things may be about to get worse following the news that they have lost a key member of their staff. This, coupled with concerns from Toto Wolff about the machinery that Haas are using, which people are suggesting is too similar to that of Ferrari's. After the shitstorm that was Aston Martin's pink Mercedes, Toto Wolff says F1 needs to rethink the rules that allows teams close collaboration such as what Haas have with Ferrari. Back in 2020, Aston Martin, then Racing Point, fielded what was effectively a pink Mercedes. Their car, a clone of the previous season's title-winning Mercedes. Rivals were up in arms. The FIA later introduced a ban on teams using 3D cameras and complex software systems to copy rival designs. However, Wolff doesn't feel that ban has done enough, especially in light of Haas's close relationship with Ferrari. Not only does the American team run Ferrari engines and buy all the permissible parts they can from the Scuderia, they even have an office in Ferrari's Maranello headquarters. Ferrari personnel have also moved from the Scuderia's side to Haas, the biggest name on that list being designer Simone Resta. And with Haas going from 0 points last season to fighting Mercedes in the first few rounds in this year's championship, Wolff says F1 needs to rethink the regulations. "I think it needs reform," said the Mercedes motorsport boss, "because we want to avoid these kinds of discussions that we have now, the polemic around the last few days or last few weeks. Everybody deserves to perform well, and people should get credit when they've done a good job. But some of the job hopping or entity hopping on the same premises is just creating arguments that aren't necessary for the sport." So definitely for us, we have Aston Martin in the wind tunnel that we had 2 years ago. Quite a shitstorm about that. We have been handling them with the utmost diligence. But going forward, if we were to need to compromise our, let's say, income ability, we need to do this because none of the teams should be able to cooperate in a way that we're seeing today with some of the teams. Haas's VF22 has been dubbed Moby Dick in some quarters. The car said to be a white Ferrari. Team boss Günther Steiner has scoffed at that suggestion. He told F1Insider.com, "These allegations have always existed and always will. I stay calm. If we are good, they call our car a white Ferrari. If we are bad, then no. I'm starting to find that ridiculous. You have to work hard for envy. You get pity for free. I wish the others would be green with envy because that means we did a very good job." Asked if he felt the Haas was too similar to the Ferrari F175 and whether he sought clarification with the FIA regarding the Haas car, Wolff said Haas had clearly done a super job with this year's new regulations and then it was up to Mercedes to learn from it. I mean, Haas has made a huge jump from being last, the way they were, into having been solid and into Q3, I think, in Bahrain. So that's an interesting step, he said. "For us, it's a learning exercise because as an organisation, we have 2,000 people and we've been successful in the past. And suddenly you're fighting a team that's much smaller in size, so they must have done a super job. And it's not just Mercedes who have concerns with the remarkable progress that's been made by Haas this season." McLaren team boss Andreas Seidel says, "For us, this is a question of principle. Two teams should not be allowed to have more than the engine and the transmission interiors in common. There should be no infrastructure sharing. We know from the FIA that it is impossible to monitor all forms of transfer. What cannot be controlled should be prohibited. The danger is that an exchange of information will make the B team better than it is, at the same time help the A team." Meanwhile, Alpine team boss Otmar Zafnauer also reveals doubts between the lines. Haas is a small team that jumped from last to third place over the winter. That comes as a surprise. I expected that the balance of power would change a little with such a large rule reform because it favours the teams that have more know-how and better infrastructure. But I am convinced that the FIA will investigate the case and come to the right conclusions about how similar these two cars are. So what are the differences and similarities between the Ferrari and the Haas cars? This is where it gets quite complicated, but we'll do our best to help it make sense. The differences start with the chassis. This builds wider, like the nose of the Haas VF22. The front wings hang on the first wing element of the Ferrari, the second for Haas. The front wing end plates and side fins are shaped very differently on the Haas than on the sister car. The adjustment mechanism of the wing, which is an indicator of where air vortices are deliberately generated, is further in the US Ferrari. The cooling inlets on the Haas are round, but they are flat as mailbox slots on the Ferrari. While Ferrari controls the flow at the edge of the side boxes on the front diffuser with low baffle, Haas has two that protrude further. Are you following this? Okay, yeah, good. I'll continue. Ferrari places a trough on the roof of the side boxes in which more than 11 gills of hot exhaust air is blown by the radiators. Haas has its gills in a similar place, but much less and on a flat roof. Ferrari makes the side boxes in the rear run flatter. The underbody has an elongated slot in front of the rear wheels to drain the air. Haas punched two cutouts into the edges of the floor, one much further ahead. The rise of the ground in front of the rear wheels is individually shaped for both cars, which suggests independent features of the diffuser. The fin, standing on stilts on the back of the Haas airbox, has no other car in the field. The rear wings also have different characteristics. The two stilts wind much higher around the main leaf in the Haas, but the DRS mechanism on the Ferrari is more powerful. The lower rear wing elements are also shaped differently. Does that all make sense? Good. The miraculous rise of Haas mainly has to do with the time advantage that the Americans bought in pain. For this, their 2021 car was not further developed. Alfa Sauber shows how important the time factor under a cost cap is. The Swiss racing team stopped working on the predecessor car at the end of April and deliberately focused on extreme lightweight construction. Now, the Sauber C42 is the lightest car in the field, up to 15 kilograms under the Red Bull and Mercedes. When Haas experienced his first failure in Melbourne, conspiracy theories were immediately raised that Ferrari had turned off their B team's power, so the discussions were not further fanned. This was fueled by the surprisingly poor top speed values of the Haas on Saturday. What nonsense! Team boss Günther Steiner shook his head. It would not be allowed to prescribe a different engine mode to a customer team than the one used by the factory team itself. In fact, Haas failed in Australia to find a setup that uses the tyres properly. The investigations of the FIA will not bring the result desired by the frustrated teams. Nevertheless, the dispute over the synergies between the A and B team will continue. For example, the sharing of the wind tunnel. So we have the frustrations from Mercedes and Toto Wolff about the links between Ferrari and Haas, but the bad news doesn't end there for the Silver Arrows. Ferrari has struck a blow against Mercedes in 2022, not only on the track, but also behind the scenes. Gianluca Romani, in fact, has made the switch from Mercedes to Ferrari. In the fight for a world title, the entire team must be able to build a special car and develop it further. Besides good drivers, a team boss, and a technical director, every individual in the company is important to success. Therefore, it's not surprising that Formula One teams look at their competitors to see if they can strengthen themselves by taking an employee from another team. Red Bull Racing, for example, took many people from Mercedes for its new engine project, and Aston Martin also shopped at the top teams for their new factory. Ferrari has always been interesting for engineers, but especially for the proud Italians. Therefore, it's not surprising that Romani is making the switch from Mercedes to Ferrari. The aerodynamics specialist, who earned his Master of Science in Aerospace Engineering in Milan, obtained that master's at Mercedes. There, he also got a job in aerodynamics, but as of April, he'll be working in the same role for Ferrari in Maranello. It's another blow for Mercedes in their pursuit of catching Ferrari this season, in what Wolff described the progress making by Scuderia as unprecedented. Ferrari took the unusual step of choosing not to develop their car much last season as they focus purely on this season. Despite that approach, Ferrari managed to secure third place in the championship at the expense of McLaren. At the same time, the team positioned itself as one of the favourites ahead of the new Formula One season. The huge step that Ferrari has made causes bewilderment for Mercedes team boss Toto Wolff. "I can only congratulate them," he says to AS.com, about the strong package of the Italian racing stable, which is doing extremely well in terms of both performance and reliability. The Austrian sees that a big step has been taken in engine power in particular. Previously, they were about 14 brake horsepower behind, but now they're another 14 brake horsepower ahead. Wolff says he finds that step remarkably large. "We have never seen such a big progress in such a short time," says the Mercedes team boss.